Oh, yeah. Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Bass Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It is, it's the end of November. It's almost December. It's like 2022 just whizzed by. I mean, it really did. It seems like just a few weeks ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, but I know that it was back in like the beginning of the year. And incidentally, I was looking at the output folder for what we do, and I've got basically like 2 years worth of content just stowed away on this machine, a little bit over 2 years. And it's really interesting because there's this really like subtle transition or evolution of just the thumbnail image of the video. It's really subtle. Sometimes it has information. Sometimes it has an image. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's and then there's always the earth. That's like the only thing that's like really consistent in the background. But it just reminds me that, like, you know, all this stuff is continually changing, even though it doesn't seem like it. Somehow we managed to create several hundred gigabytes worth of talk show.
Yeah, and in the process, it transitions, I think, from like
Matrix to MCU to Russian War. It's like wide range.
Well, it's interesting because I think the one consistent feature is that we talk about things that are essentially video entertainment, because that's kind of the name of the game right now. It's visual entertainment. Music is a big component of that, and there is a music industry, and it is thriving. But man, the film industry, the television industry make money, like they make money in like gobs that are indescribably huge. And they deserve to. There are huge teams that are required to make some of these movies or shows that bring these stories to life. I've been watching this show Peripheral in the last day, and it is a fantastic sci-fi so far. Everything about it is compelling. There are a few little things that I thought were little strange quirks at first, but then once it settles in, the timeline of this story, when things are taking place, and then that there is a second future timeline that's also occurring, but could also be changing in real time depending on the outcomes of things that are happening in the past. And they reflect this at one point when they're talking about like the complexities of quantum tunneling. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. So I'm really keen on where this goes. I'm actually very excited about this sci-fi because so far most of it is people in rooms talking, and there's a little bit of action and some gunfire and vehicles that have cloaking devices, which is very cool, by the way. But for the most part, it's a lot of dialogue, and the use of computer graphics or computer imagery is very well tempered. And one of the things that I really like, and maybe I'm just convincing myself, but you can tell when they're in the simulation versus when they're in the real world because of the way that they do these kind of heavy-handed noise reduction and like contrast enhancement. So like facial features and hair become really pronounced. Well, not pronounced. They just become, the lines become more contrasty, easier to see, more defined, and that's cool. I think it's also on Amazon too, which is the weird part. But they did Expanse, so they've got their they've got good teams. They're working with good teams, it seems. When I say team, I mean like I want to emphasize they're probably like, you know, hundreds of people that have to all do their part to make these shows or these stories come to life.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I haven't heard of this until now.
It's like they've got like 7 or 8 episodes or something, I think. I just stumbled upon it last night. I didn't even realize that it existed. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I don't know anything about it. And by the end of the first episode, I thought, man, A+. Way to start with this interesting way to start a story off with just they get right into it. They didn't bother.
Oh, it looks like the last episode hasn't even come out yet.
Oh,
out the second.
Ah, cool. Well, it's really I'm glad that I like got into it towards the end of this run, because now I don't feel like I'm gonna run out of it all of a sudden.
Yeah, Amazon's been doing some decent stuff as far as like their production. I didn't watch any of the
Expanse
Tolkien stuff.
I
heard it was good.
Oh, what's that? Rings of Power.
Yeah, Rings of Power. I couldn't even think of the name of it.
I watched the first couple episodes, and it looks fantastic. It looks beautiful.
I just rewatched Reacher.
Reacher's awesome.
Like, I think when they're adapting books, they're doing a good job of like staying faithful enough to the source material that it's gonna appease the people who read the books, but also changing the stories enough that you have a reason to like watch the adaptation. And I think that's like the real balance.
That's a good point.
Adaptation.
The version of Killing Floor that we got with the Amazon Reacher is very much an adaptation of the book, and I'm not really sure what Reacher stories Tom Cruise was trying to tell, but I'm not sure if those actually come from the books. Also, Tom Cruise's Reacher is not big enough to be Jack Reacher.
No, it's just not. You just can't buy it. And I think part of the funny thing about Alan Ritchson is like, it's not that he's too small. It's that because they were giving him lifts, he's like not a small person, but it like made his arms look too short.
Well,
so the whole time it's like, I know you're not a small person, but trying to make you look 6'5",
yeah,
like, distorts the shortness of his arms.
The weird part is for his height, he's proportionally very big looking. Like,
right, yeah, he doesn't look small without lifts in his shoes.
But then they tried to tried to embiggen him, and you're right, he did kind of have like short arms, short extra stout arms. But I thought he was a great Reacher. Like he was a great Reacher. When you see
he was bad at all.
Yeah, like when you see his big hands, it's like, yeah, that's how big he's supposed to be.
Yeah. I think it served the purpose for the shots. I was just, it's really nitpicky, but it's like it's way more believable than Tom Cruise. Like I'm not believing Tom Cruise is Jack Reacher on any amount of drugs that there's nothing that would make me ever believe that Tom Cruise is like playing that character is the way it's written, where it's like, it was the same thing with Wolverine. I'm still like, we're looking at Hugh Jackman, not Wolverine. It's not the way he was ever fucking written or drawn. Like the fastball special doesn't make sense with somebody who's fucking 6'1". It just doesn't. That makes no fucking sense. So, I'm of the mind where the adaptation, if it embodies the like spirit of the character, that's one thing. Like, as much as people love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, it's
time.
I just don't. It's like we need an actual Wolverine character that's like in line with what the character, again, you can't have somebody that looks like they smell good all the time as Wolverine. Like it's not gonna fucking work, man. Like we're looking at Hugh Jackman doing fucking cosplay.
I think Hugh Jackman doing cosplay with Ryan Reynolds doing cosplay as a buddy flick is a good thing though, because that'll be funny. Because we'll finally get to see Ryan Reynolds gooing over Hugh Jackman on screen, and it won't be like
it's gonna be fun.
It's be fun.
Don't get me wrong, I enjoy
it, but it's not gonna be. It's not gonna be
but it's not Wolverine.
It's not gonna be
Jackman.
In story the way that it's gonna. The Marvel universe will demand that injection of Wolverine because he's old man Logan at this point. He really is. He looks like a 260-year-old Logan, and that's okay, But we need a young Wolverine who is believable that he might actually be able to be thrown into a wall and bounce off of it and then come flying back and, gouge somebody. And Hugh Jackman's just past his prime. It's like old. It's the reason that Batfleck works. It's that old Batman shouldn't be running right into the middle of some weird battlefield. He should be using his technology because he's old and he's just a human. Well, Wolverine's getting old too, and that's not where the story is anymore. And that's okay. Torches have to be passed eventually. Like, can you imagine if we were still listening to Metallica? If that was the end of it all.
They performed at an event not too long ago, and it was pretty sad. It's like they shouldn't be performing right now. Nobody should be like seeing them have to come out on stage because they didn't manage their money well or whatever reason.
I just don't believe
need to be performing.
I just don't believe they're angry anymore. I don't think they can be angry anymore.
No, fuck no. No, they're all like grandfathers and shit. What's grandfather or no grandfather rapper either. Sit down, Snoop. Grandpa Snoop.
No,
Nobody needs to hear that fucking grandpa rap.
Snoop Dogg.
I mean, but he's making rap for kids, so it's like, yeah,
that's okay.
It makes sense. That it's like
he can make rap for kids, and he can sell like baking cookbooks with Martha Stewart, and that's awesome. That's a really good place to land. That's a really good place to land. Making stuff for kids, good cookies.
But at the same time, I'm like, what parent is buying the fucking kids song by somebody who was once indicted for murder
and also made a career out of music that is all about smoking weed
and pimping
and being gangsta and fresh and stuff like that.
So it's like, this society gets what it deserves, like, or deserves what it gets, like
both.
yes, exactly.
Ice Cube makes children's movies.
Yes. Exactly. Ice Cube was always an actor.
Dr. Dre was pretty honest about it, about making money. I mean, he just moved on to making money off of Apple.
America is such a like stage that doesn't know where the theater begins and the audience ends, and it's like it's funny to watch it like go down in flames. Obviously being in that in the fire is like I have to breathe in some smoke, cough cough. This sucks, but it's like I can still laugh at it in the process because it's like the idea that the way things were ever gonna persist forever is just absurd in that notion. But watching Elon just like burn down Twitter, and in the process, everyone realized how much fraud has been necessary for these companies to become billion-dollar companies, and like all the bots on Twitter and all the bots on YouTube and all these things that aren't actually translating into.
They lost the Lilly advertising
sales.
revenue because for over an $8 tweet. They lost whatever that Lilly revenue stream was.
Well, but it was like Lilly probably wasn't actually converting the advertising in anything. So they finally looked at the numbers and were like, oh yeah, this isn't worth it, and pulled it. Because if it was still worth it, they would definitely have kept it. But it's like the $1 billion loss on the market, that shit would have rebounded eventually if what they were doing was actually worth it in the first place.
But they might never have looked into it had there not been that $8 tweet.
Exactly.
$8 for all of that revenue. It's like laughably sad. Kind of sad, laughable, something. It's pretty terrible. I've got a different like beef with Lord Musk right now, though. I was reading about the Artemis mission because I saw this video of the aftermath of the launch and how it blew the elevator doors clean out of the elevator shaft because the pressure was just so great. And then I started watching videos about the capsule and the various modules that they're developing for this stuff, and how Mars is way off in the distance, but it's also on the horizon. And it looks like Starship's not actually going to Mars. It's just going to be a ferry between like lunar orbit and the surface of the moon. So it doesn't actually have to have a lot of the same kind of features that a planetary entry module has to have. And I almost feel like, wait a second, were we pitched a Mars ship? Wasn't this thing supposed to go to Mars? Or even like,
transport people.
maybe from like Martian orbit to the Martian surface? No, that I couldn't find anything about that. It was just about landing it on the moon. Like a lunar shuttle. So that's not even a starship. I think they realize that they can't actually build the Enterprise right now, because that's a real starship. Or even the Battlestar Galactica, which is a space battleship. Nobody wants to go to space in the fucking Battlestar. A few people probably want to go to space in a Battlestar, but we're not going to listen to them because Battlestars are looking like giant trains and they're not cool looking. They're very utilitarian. We definitely want to go to space in an Enterprise.
Well, part of it is like being able to build the ship off planet so that it doesn't have to deal with escaping Earth's gravitational pull, because that's like one type of ship, which is why they built the Enterprise in the Lagrangian point.
Yep. That's why one of the few things that I thought they retconned poorly in the Kelvin timeline was when they built the Enterprise on the surface of the Earth, and they're showing some like facility where this thing is just kind of being balanced on gigantic pylons, and it always seemed like it was very clear that these things were never meant to land in an atmosphere until Voyager. Like that, because that's a small ship. But for the most part, starships are spaceships because they have to be big enough to get the engines away from the habitation modules. Because as safe as they are, they're still capable of folding space and time. So that's some really powerful shit. It's going to take like 9 months or something. It's like an 18-month mission, like to get to Mars, do the 4 weeks, and then get back into the spaceship and then return to Earth. And then that person is definitely going to get cancer because we don't have shields. We don't have electromagnetic shielding that can protect the ship without exposing human bodies to those same electromagnetic fields. I was reading about how it would be possible to essentially coat the ship in like enough heavy metals, but when those things get hit with exotic particles, then all sorts of crazy things happen. And then there's the current design has this very tiny like shelter-like system whereby the people will be able to load it up with supplies and hide out during like coronal mass ejections and things of that nature. But, that's a life capsule, or that's a safe room inside of a spaceship. They can't, like, surround it with enough water even to protect the occupants. They have to wrap it in special metal layers and mesh. And it seems like it's just not ready. It's not. No, none of this is. None of this is ready. It's really ambitious, but
Overly ambitious, as a matter of fact.
like, and even that's really diplomatic way of putting it. It's like foolhardy ambitious.
Well, I think this is the point where people start to realize you can't just like throw money at an engineering problem, and you have to have the actual engineers work through the solution, which takes time. And you can't just add engineers to the problem to make it go faster. So it's like,
Well, I mean, how much money has humanity thrown at oncology? And then we're supposed to expect a few engineers to solve the problem of how do we prevent people from getting cancer? That's the messaging. It's step back, medical scientists. We're the engineers. We'll engineer a solution. Well, that doesn't fucking work either. There's too many variables. Like until scientists and engineers figure out a way to have a ship that produces its own Van Allen belt, man. Which will be awesome.
you know what? Maybe that's the solution. Is like it'll have to produce its own radiation shield.
Yeah.
That's like the counter effect that creates like a negative zone or something.
Yeah.
Who knows? We're not there yet, whatever it is.
Definitely not. I mean, the shield array on a Star Trek spaceship, on any spaceship in the Star Trek universe, is one of the most significant features of the entire spaceship. It's not
the deflector.
Yeah, the deflector dish, that big array. The thing that produces all of the electromagnetic fields that protect the ship and allow them to communicate.
So underappreciated, really.
It's like it's other than the actual dish, it's the most prominent feature, I think, because it's out front. It's always visible and almost always visible. I guess the nacelles are a more prominent feature, but they're in the back of the ship. Some Federation ships have multiple deflector arrays because they have to be able to do even more crazy shit like close spatial rifts, and giant ass anomalies that are destroying the fabric of space-time. We don't even have anything like that. We've got the equivalent of walkie-talkies on our spaceships.
Yeah, it takes so long for our space entities to communicate. It's like we're nowhere near that. Not even remotely close.
I think the control messaging delay for sending a sequence of commands to the robots on Mars is like 20 minutes, but that's just like a burst on a laser. That's not actually like real communication.
Well, I think we're also lucky that this shit's falling apart with Twitter, because I think it's going to necessitate a reexamination of SpaceX's place in American space travel. They never should have been that much of the process, as much as NASA has made them. Because at some point, NASA got so defunded that it was like, depending on the Russian rockets to go to the space station, and then it's like, clearly we're not having good enough relations for that type of shit to happen right now. Um,
And it
but
costs
the
too much
idea
for
that
ESA, and it costs too much to go with the Indian program. China will never send up Americans because, I mean, because Americans won't be allowed on them, not by the Chinese, but by the American government. They're like, no, they'll steal all the technology. The Chinese were like, we already have your technology.
I know personally, I'm okay with a reset on space access, but I don't think the American government would ever accept that type of regression, which is why they're so like, we'll subsidize SpaceX even if it means like fucking everything up in the process. We don't want to lose any sort of appearance of losing ground, even if it means we are actually destroying the foundations of the stuff we had already built.
Yeah, the perceived advantage.
Which now, looking at the Russian, how do I say this? The Russian incoherence in their deployment of their military strategy. There's no way they have the space weapons like they were trying to make it seem like. No fucking way. That's bullshit. That shit is like theoretical still, and they never got that shit functional. No fucking way.
Physics still exists.
I mean, it's not that they didn't have the theoretical capacity, but looking at how they've operated, there's no way they had the internal consistency to make that shit actually work and have it become anything more than like a cool idea that they could theoretically do, but incompetence is like going to make something that demanding near impossible for that type of structure to pull off. This is where the same shit in America, where it's like you can throw a bunch of money at something, but you're still going to end up with a fucking exploding car that can't actually drive itself.
Well,
no matter what you promise.
There are no manufacturers that have completed like level 5 certification for their autonomous systems. They just don't exist. And there are a lot of teams who are trying to engineer a solution, and all of the problems that we see in the mainstream, those are like entry level problems compared to what level 5 certification problems are. Like if a level 2 system like a Tesla has problems identifying people with a larger proportion of melanin in their skin, then that's like not even an issue for level 5. Their problems are like, how do they deal with human drivers when they are autonomous? And they can't even solve that problem because humans are such a psychotic variable. You know, a person might be on their phone and driving normally, and then they realize they've got to turn, and they'll just engage in some kind of erratic driving behavior. And as fast as a computer is, and as much information and telemetry they gain from all of their sensors, it's not enough because humans are unpredictable. And so the idea that like Tesla's just going to buy a solution for this, or GM's just going to buy a solution, or Ford, or insert any company who's chasing autonomous vehicle operation, they're still trying to push a product that'll just make money. They're not even ready for a fully autonomous vehicle because they can't even get their stuff to work at like level 2.
Yeah, and the lies are catching up too fast.
Yeah, I think the whole like psychotic update cycle really screwed everyone. This freakish race to the bottom in terms of keeping everyone on a cell phone leash, and then now vehicles are the update cycle. There used to be a mid generation update cycles every 3 or 4 years, and then vehicle generations would last 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10, 12 years sometimes before the vehicle had actually changed. Now they're changing like every couple of years. New models, brand new fascia, all this stuff, and it's coming out so fast that they don't take enough time to fix the problems that exist, and they just move on to the next thing. It's like they expect, oh, we'll get it eventually, and by the time we do, nobody will have noticed it or even remember that there was a problem, which is like the opposite of how things should be brought to market. There's no loyalty to the customer in that model where the updates happen all the time, especially when the updates involve different hardware or an update requires, hardware that has greater processing capability. So now they've got to go in and get a new tablet for their fucking car.
Tesla, people who...
Do you think that we would even have Android if they had waited till it was like really functionally stable? Because I think that like Android needed to be just thrown into the market and be given the immense volume of feedback that happened from a public alpha, essentially. I think Android benefited from that in ways that, it's the reason that it's actually as rock steady as it is and can do so many things. Sometimes I think that the Apple model, it works for the first few years because they deliver this thing that's rock solid, but it's not actually designed to change. It's designed to be stable. Like stability and being stable and mutable are not actually the same thing. They're like kind of antithetical to one another. Can you imagine if like you had to get regular updates for a graphing calculator?
Man. Texas Instruments used to make some solid product. I mean, I'm sure that they would still exist, but
I think they still make chips. But they would release like I remember seeing a TI-82 and then an TI-83, but they were completely different models. And then I saw a TI-86, and it had even more features. But they made those same 3 calculators for like 20 years. I'm pretty sure those kind of calculators are still used at the highest levels of hand calculation.
Well, because they're gonna be better than most other devices, except for like an actual laptop or something.
Yeah.
Which then at that point you're like,
just build the software into an app that can run on a tablet,
right?
And then but you still have a TI 1000 or whatever, TI 1000 Pro Android edition coming this fall. It probably already exists.
There's going to be a point where the processing power needed is going to exceed the capacity of like their calculators, and then go into like you're using
computers.
GPUs or some shit anyway. So it is like, I feel like the calculator, it must be for like flight engineers or some shit where they need to do some calculations where they're
a really specific set of calculations too,
but really close to something that they can't be near a computer. And it's like, you know,
Something that has a profound electromagnetic field.
right. There's only going to be a very specific situations in which somebody's going to be using the calculator and not a laptop or I mean like a desktop or something or a tablet even. But
yeah, like a tablet with some kind of dongle that just plugs into a primary system and just reads the data instead of having to manually enter information. I think manual entry is interesting though, because with tablets, I mean, with a keyboard and a mouse, we've had this all our lives. And so, I can just blindly navigate a keyboard and it's just how it is. But sometimes when I'm using a phone, I'm just like, you're just swiping at your phone and tapping it and then making gestures. And it's pretty cool. I mean, I won't lie. It's actually really cool because it's one step closer to, Star Trek and all the weird stuff that we saw people doing to glass plates. But it's so strange, like how quickly information entry and like can change. We go from buttons and mechanical buttons, and there's been kind of a renaissance of mechanical keyboards in the last few years, last decade or so, where there are more and more keyboards with customizable key sets. Some people like the cherry, the brown cherry, or the something or other MX key, or the blue, because they all have their own kind of rebound rate or pressure requirements to actuate the key itself. Some of them are membrane. Some people like membrane keys. I like membrane keyboards. They don't make any noise. But in just like one generation, the touchscreen interface has become so prominent. It's handheld computers basically didn't exist 15 years ago. I mean, they did, but not really. Not like we have them now. Nowhere near as capable as they are now.
Well, the graphing calculator is the handheld computer, effectively.
It is, but
15 years ago.
But you can't watch a movie on it.
I guess 20.
And it doesn't have its own eye, and it can't call or pull up information from the internet. I'm not trying to poo-poo on the graphing calculator, because those things are an industry standard and they've been rock solid for probably longer than I've been alive. But it blows me away sometimes, how much things can change. And it's exciting. It's also really strange though, because when you see a bunch of people on the side of the street waiting to get onto a bus, and they're all just kind of leaned over, doing this physically doing the same thing, but I know that they're not doing the same thing. Well, I hope they're not doing the same thing. If they're all like Instagramming the exact same thing at the same time, that'd be kind of weird. Although I suppose that could happen if they all saw something and got video of it and were posting it at the same time.
So apparently there are now calculators that can play movies.
Really?
Yeah. Numworks. And they run emulators and shit on there.
I knew that somebody loaded Doom onto onto an older calculator. But people are trying to load Doom onto all sorts of absurd things. I think somebody loaded it onto the refrigerator not too long ago.
Oh, I guess they combined this with the Raspberry Pi, it looks like.
Well, that's kind of cheating.
Yeah, kind of cheating.
I mean, that's kind of really cheating. They changed the name, I thought, of the operating system, but it's still like a full-blown Linux. You can run almost anything on it. You can run control software for like actuators, for anything from like actuators to sensors to movie playback. Control your entire smart home. integrate with your data server and be able to stream music to various rooms independently of each other. I think that's the kind of thing that if somebody really wanted a smart house, they would start like at the very beginning with the engineers and the architect to integrate all of that stuff on the way in. Anytime I look at like really, really complex smart home integrations, it always seems like there was way more forethought put in than any DIY or tutorial ever gets into. And obviously because it's done by professional smart home installations or installers.
Well, it does take a lot of planning to make sure that everything integrates to make it seamless. Otherwise, there are a bunch of friction points that make it not as smart as it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Like especially, so some systems will have like a limit on the number of lights you can have on it. So you might end up having two different systems for lights, or like if there's a speaker or something, it might only be able to connect to certain types of lights. So then you have to, potentially make sure that the things that you're purchasing are from the same third party provider in terms of the APIs, just because like Google shit won't work with Amazon shit all the time, but sometimes it does because of the third parties, depending on like if it's like a speaker or if it's a light, which
well, you'd think there'd be some kind of open standard that would allow for some kind of interoperability, but you've touched on something that I've also encountered in pretty much everything that I've read is there's a very significant reason for concern about the longevity of any of the manufacturers, of third-party manufacturers, whether they try to get into the Alexa system or the Nest system or whatever ecosystem. We can't even predict how long any of these companies will actually last, or if their technology will survive, or if their technology get bought out by a larger company and absorbed into a different ecosystem. Like, because it's still so fresh. I remember when smart homes were still running with like optical sensors and temperature sensors, and were just more reactionary houses that if certain conditions applied, then they would react and like turn on lights or turn on a fan or change, when the room gets too hot. And then eventually they started becoming more capable. Like they started getting cameras with motion regions that were defined by the user definable motion regions, where if there was activity in that area, then they would react in a different way. And then they started getting more and more complicated and integrating with computers. And now we can do all sorts of crazy cool stuff, like with a Raspberry Pi. You can give it essentially ears for its Bluetooth, and put multiple Bluetooth modules throughout a building, and then it'll listen for when a device moves from one room to another, and can follow the person around and change the conditions in a room to suit that user. But that kind of profile requires programming and a lot of thought going in. That's still not even touching on the most sophisticated stuff that is out there that like fully integrates with a phone or with somebody's augmented reality interface. Some of this stuff is really impressive and expensive. I think some of it is actually...
But we've also gotten to a point where a lot of the stuff is over-engineered too.
That's true. I'm gonna say
and I think,
I'm not even sure if some of these things are even useful.
yeah, that's what, I think we've definitely gone beyond that point, and like the usefulness is questionable in a lot of the things. So
Yeah, we're definitely in the we're in the we can do it phase, and we're approaching the questioning if we should do it phase very rapidly. I think with a lot of technology.
but this gets back to the, cheaper TVs.
Oh man.
I saw that. What is it? The TV we were talking about a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
The lowest price was now $250.
229.
Or yeah, 229.
229 for a 65-inch 4K TV with Roku built in, and it's HDR capable. Like, but you said, like it looked like it has the same specs as your television, but your television looks like it has a beefier chassis. But
I mean, it's the only thing I can think of in that the brand that I have is still 400. Like it's the same TV, and like the brand that they have for 229, I've never heard of. Like I'd never heard of the one I have, but it's like it was $400 cheaper than the Samsung version of the same TV when I got this one. But this one, it was like 450 then.
But there's only like,
and now it's like 400.
There's only like
so it's
three LCD panel manufacturers plus their Chinese knockoff counterparts. So there's like 6 real LCD panel manufacturers on Earth. So your chances of getting, one of the big 3 are at least 50%. So you got to.
Right. It's going to come from one of those factories. But again, and the reason, so it's like, oh, what's the big difference between the frame? It's like, well, on the $200 frame, bugs might be able to get in or some shit because the seal is like slightly not as tight or something. So it's not going to be like the screen's going to be the same, but because the frame is like slightly cheaper or whatever, because I've had Vizio TVs where bugs have gotten in the frame and it's like you'll see them crawling around and it's like, what the fuck? I mean, it's like a gnat or something.
Yeah. Now I have a television screen that has this one black dot that I watched slowly move over the course of several months until it stopped moving. And I don't think it's a bug. I think it was just a piece of like carbon or plastic or dirt, some kind of buildup. But it started in one spot and slowly moved. And I can't unsee it now. It's always in front of me. It's way worse than like, a dead pixel or a pixel that's always green or always blue or always red, because you only see those under very limited conditions. But a tiny black speck in the middle of a screen, that's always there. And you can't clean it off. I've tried. But, there's only so much that I'm willing to attempt because I can't take that thing apart, and I can only blow air in from so many locations and it doesn't do anything. I'm still confused how the thing even got in there. It had to have been in there before it was put together and it just relocated itself. I admit that I'm not like an expert at pumping air into television screens though, so. But still, if a 65-inch television is less than $250, I remember paying $200 for a 27-inch tube television once. And I thought that was a great deal then. This is like more than twice the size.
Yeah, I remember at one point getting, I think it was like a 32-inch CRT.
It was heavy as hell too.
Oh yeah, I think it might have been like $600 or $700 at the time.
Was it?
It may have been slightly cheaper, but it was a floor model. But it was like a good deal at the time. So it's
Wait,
like,
was it silver?
Yeah,
I think I might have helped move that thing.
yeah. That was a floor model. But I think it must have been like 2002 or 2003, maybe. Um, yeah, it was like probably $600, and I think again because of flat screens coming out and then being like really expensive, the 32-inch flat screen at the time was probably like $1,200.
Yeah.
If not more than that.
I remember I placed that 27-inch tube television CRT with a flat panel CRT 1 or 2 years later for like $240, $250. And so, like, I think that was like one of the last tube televisions I bought. I think after that I bought a LCD screen, big LCD, like a 40-inch LCD HD panel. I think that was like $500, $400 or $500 even. And it had like a limited gamut. Like it had problems reproducing like yellows and pinks, and it just had problems. It wasn't a good panel. And there was no amount of like improving the brightness or in software even, because I tried hooking it up to computers and I couldn't even fix the output in the software. And now displays have, over 100% gamut coverage, which doesn't sound like it sounds like it shouldn't make sense, but it does. and they have incredible resolutions, and the dynamic range is beyond what our eyes can even perceive. And it only costs $229 for over twice the size of a fucking TV. God damn. You shared a chart that showed like inflation and deflation of goods from 2020 till now, I think, or maybe 2021 till now, and it seemed like the value of unnecessary things, like luxury items, are going down, but everything that people actually need, housing, food, healthcare, reliable transportation, or access to it, those things are becoming more expensive. But phones, cars, things that might not actually be like what are they called? Discretionary purchases. Those things are all being cheaper, are becoming cheaper. All the consumer goods are becoming cheaper.
Well, and you wonder, it's like,
this is the late stage,
the demand for those things are going down too? It must mean in this system that was supposed to be the supply demand curve, right? The supply of TVs going up and the demand going down, while the supply of hospital services is going down and the demand is going up. Seems to track.
Yeah. So capitalism is working. Fuck.
Yeah.
But
tracks.
Even though somebody can get a giant ass, super capable television screen monitor for practically nothing, you still can't find an Xbox X anywhere or a PlayStation 5 anywhere, apparently. But you can buy badass GPUs like crazy now. If you can afford to power them up and not melt your computer. They were blaming it on people not installing the clip properly. That's what NVIDIA decided. After their forensic analysis, the builders, the computer builders who assembled their machines, did not insert their clip far enough into the industry standard connector.
That's one way to go about not taking any responsibility for fucking that up.
Because at first they said, oh, when it was installed is because the cable was bent over at 90 degrees. And then the entirety of like the computer building microcosm was like, hey, you can do that. And then every electrical engineer on earth was like, yeah, they're not lying. You can bend a cable. That shouldn't cause that problem. And then NVIDIA says, oh, well, we'll go back and perform more forensic analysis. The other day I saw this Ars Technica article about why it's a bad idea to take a computer into a computer shop, because a significant number of computers or computer shops have been kind of embroiled in this whole, we need your password to perform certain tasks. And sure, that makes sense for some things, but for others, it doesn't always make sense. Like a BIOS update. You might not have to get into a system to perform a BIOS update. But these are also things that, a lot of the things that they were saying that people would bring computers in for service are end user serviceable, like not changing out hardware, but something that a little bit of reading can resolve. And a significant number of complaints were about data intrusion. People going through, they created essentially like a sting operation where they installed software to monitor all activity on the computer when it was being accessed. And they found that women are obviously, their data was more likely to be sifted through than men. And lo and behold, computer service technicians were more likely to search for images and videos than anything else. But, some of them are going through everything. And then a portion of these computer technicians are trying to cover their tracks, but they're not like computer forensics specialists, so they don't actually know how to cover all of their tracks. And it sucked, because for a brief moment I thought, oh, I'm glad I know how to do all this stuff myself. But then there's the part of me that wants to be a little bit empathetic towards people that haven't invested the time to read all of the things and to develop those kinds of behaviors to fix their own computer. I 100% agree. Like, yeah, you take it to a specialist if there's an actual hardware issue that's beyond one's skill set. But most of this stuff isn't actually that hard.
I bet a lot of it's just cleaning out the computer, really.
Yeah.
Or cleaning out the hardware, whatever it is. Most of the time.
I remember years ago, a buddy of mine gave me a laptop. He's like, man, you can have this. I don't even want it. It doesn't work anymore. It just overheats. So I took it home and I opened it up, and it was full of lint and tobacco, like fine cut hand roll tobacco and weed. It was hilarious. I got the compressor out and blew it all out and took the processor, the heatsink off, and put new thermal paste down and fire dried up and let it run overnight, and it didn't have any problems, and sold it on eBay. That computer is lucky that it didn't catch on fire. I'm actually surprised it didn't catch on fire.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that doesn't happen more often, really.
Well, remember, it was like I think between 10 to 15 years ago, there was when all the Dells when all the Intel computers were running too hot, and there was this problem where, and it was uniquely localized to teenage girls and young women in college, because they would put their laptop on their bed. So they would essentially burn through a portion of their bedding, and then the fire retardant material in the bed mattress itself would prevent the rest from escalating. But I remember seeing numerous images for several years as Intel struggled to get their temperatures under control of just pictures of beds with these burnt squares in them. It turns out that duvet-covered comforter thing traps sufficient heat.
That's crazy.
You remember when computer batteries used to get swollen?
Oh man, yeah, and fucking sometimes explode.
And
Jesus
sometimes
Christ.
explode. Yeah.
Yeah. That shit in phone batteries too.
Yeah. Apparently, there is a generation of Samsung phones that utilized battery technology that has a very limited shelf life. Like a lot of modern Samsung phones have gotten away from this, but there's a few generations where if they fall into disuse, they should not be shelved. They should be dismantled or disposed of because the batteries will eventually fail, like guaranteed to fail and catch on fire. I need to find that article. I was reading about it and thought I had this brief moment of like, batteries, like battery Schadenfreude, but it's also it reminded me of the laptops that would explode and that whole generation of cell phones that exploded. That really wasn't even that long ago.
I remember what's his name? CeeLo there was like a video of him with a phone exploding in his pocket and everybody thought it was fake because nobody could believe that phones were exploding like that. And then a ton more videos came out.
Bless CeeLo.
That was kind of a funny video, though. I mean, because he didn't get hurt or anything. But.
Well, yeah, it's never funny when people get hurt. Like,
no, not when they actually get hurt.
Getting spooked and screeching like a child, that's hilarious. But even if they like run around in a circle and like run into a tree and knock themselves out, that's still funny. But as soon as they hit the ground and they don't get back up, then it's like, oh shit, they might have like a concussion. Then it's not funny. It's like still kind of funny.
I don't know if you saw the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special.
Oh, I did, actually.
I couldn't finish it. Oh my God. I can't do Christmas or like musical anything that's like not an album. Like the way music is being abused in Western media when it's so painful.
So,
oh my God, it's so painful.
I actually really enjoyed the whole kidnapping of Kevin Bacon storyline, but that was about it. I thought that part was kind of funny when they found out that he was an actor, and then the whole like we hate actors that whole bit that was kind of amusing, but it's also a story that involves kidnapping. And I don't know, man. It was weird. I'm always I don't watch A Christmas Story. I don't watch A Charlie Brown Christmas. I watched this because I saw it and I thought, oh yeah, more Marvel stuff. Let's see what they did. Good. It's only like 30 minutes or something.
Yeah, I saw it was only like 40 minutes or
Oh, it's
something.
40.
I just couldn't make it through. I couldn't make it through. It was like even the part where they were kidnapping Kevin Bacon, that joke just dragged on way too long. And I'm like, oh God, everything there's these like beats and these formulas that people use for like jokes, or insert funny part here, or this is like where
Oh
a
yeah.
joke is supposed to go. And then they're like, oh, if you want something to be funny, just repeat it and yell it and like say it over and over, and eventually it'll be funny, like David Letterman. And it's like, it just, it was, I know I'm not being jaded because
No, I still
it
struggle to
was,
figure out how Drax is supposed to be entertaining. He's like he's got really severe like autism, basically, right?
no, their species doesn't have, um or his entire planet, like nobody uses metaphors, so it's not just him. It's like, but there's none of them left because Thanos killed them all. So it was like, in that context, um a species that doesn't understand metaphors is like, ha ha, funny, but it's like a one note joke, and it's really like, you can only do that shit like one or two times before it gets old.
Yeah, maybe that's why I still struggle to understand where he fits into the whole structure, because it's not funny.
A lot of, and
Drax is funny.
it's not just Guardians. A lot of stuff is not funny that's like labeled comedy.
Yeah.
And it's just shock or extreme, and it's like, it's not actually funny. Like the most recent season of Big Mouth, it's not funny. I tried to watch an episode and it was painful, and they leaned on that music shit. I mean, they've been doing it before, but it's like, it's not really a comedy anymore. Just because it's not really funny. And I think it's hard for shit that's not serious to not be funny, I think, like, and exist for much longer. Is like the beginning of the end, when you see shit like, it starts off, and some things are never funny. Like, I don't know if you remember Chicago Party Ant. Like, that shit was never funny. But you'll get these, like, what's the show? The Great North. It's like, there are funny moments in season one, but
I thought that was a drama.
Is it?
I thought it was. I didn't think it was that funny.
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Dramas can have funny moments, though.
Right?
Dramas can have funny moments.
It felt more like a drama than a comedy, which is where I'm like, well, I guess that kind of, maybe it is, but
I think that's like a fairly common theme with Netflix and Hulu and all of the television production companies.
Dan Harmon.
Anytime somebody laughs in a focus group, that's a comedy.
Yeah, because like Solar Opposites, it's like not really funny, but it's amusing. But
it's a really high level comedy, but it's not. It takes a lot. It's like higher level comedy than Futurama ever aspired to.
Yeah, but it's not like make you bust out laughing.
No. It's like
harder
giggle
to
to
do
yourself.
Yeah, that's where I consider amusing. Like, if something is like, oh, chuckle out loud, that's really more amusing than funny. Because I feel like if something's actually funny, where you're like, if you can say, oh, that's hilarious, it's not actually that hilarious because you're not laughing. So there's this line of things being amusing in a way that looks like it's funny, but it's not actually that funny. And I think specifically Americans conflate those two things a lot of times because, especially with how comedy changes, it evolves. Like something that was funny, like even 5 months ago, isn't necessarily going to be funny now. And it's not because of repeat exposure, but sometimes the notion of what's funny in society drastically changes in a short period. Like any sort of like Russian jokes would not, I mean, not to say they're funny now, but Yakov Smirnoff wouldn't work right now as Russia is like actively engaged in a hot war with Ukraine. Like that shit would not work right now.
Well, his stuff was funny because of the Cold War and all the subversive nature of surveillance.
Right. It has to be cold. Like if there's anything, it has to be cold. Like once it goes hot, you can't do that shit. It's not funny. It like crosses a line where you're like, this isn't cool.
In Putin's Russia, television watches you. Well, yeah, we know. That's not even a joke. In Putin's Russia, gun shoots you. Well, that's also a joke. That's not a joke either. That's very real. What was the other? There's a couple of in Soviet Russia jokes. You know, those things were they funny because they were true, or funny because he said it with such a bad accent?
I don't know if they were ever funny though.
I know that's what I mean. Like, was it
like this is where they were more amusing? This is like Yakov Smirnoff was never actually funny. It was amusing. Yeah. And this gets back to the point of like a lot of things that are actually just amusing get labeled as funny because it's easier, and it becomes like
Dane Cook wasn't
conflated.
Dane Cook wasn't funny because of the things he said. He was funny because he acted like a buffoon.
Mm-hmm.
Like his behavior was amusing and at times belly laugh inducing. But I don't think he told a memorable joke. His contribution was the super finger.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, that's like it doesn't even rise to the level of, you know, the bird. It's the super finger. And maybe that won't even survive, you know, the collective consciousness's fleeting memory. But his contribution was a gesture, not a joke. It was a behavior, not a story. I don't mean to pick on Dane Cook because I know that he made a couple of movies.
No, fuck Dane Cook. But like, he's terrible.
He's an easy target. That's why. Like there are plenty of other comedians who tell inappropriate jokes who are just as like
well, you want to feel bad for Dane Cook because his brother stole all this shit, but then you realize, oh, Dane Cook was like grooming young girls. It's like, oh, he's a shitty person too.
Oh, that's see, that's like the depths of Dane. I didn't even know that about that guy. That's even worse. Like now it's like I can almost forgive him for being a horrible comedian if he's actually a shitty person.
That was like his 23-year-old girlfriend who he's known for over 5 years. So whenever that shit, his fiance, when he was 50 and she was 23, he knew her before she was like 18. So there was definitely some fucked up shit going on with Dane Cook and his wife. And I don't know if they're still married or not, but he like he tried to play the victim because he definitely got robbed. Not to say he wasn't a victim in that regard, but he was also doing some fucked up shit too. So it's like, you know, when a bad person gets something done to them, do you feel bad for them?
No,
not really, you know.
Not at all.
But I think the issue was that he hadn't married her yet, so it wasn't like it hadn't been revealed that he was a groomer. So yeah, fuck Dane Cook. Yeah, it's okay to make fun of him. Definitely.
Well,
And
yeah.
I think he was also accused of stealing jokes, if I'm not mistaken.
So he was a clown, really. He wasn't actually a comedian.
Yeah, Dane Cook was definitely accused of stealing jokes from multiple people. So don't know if it was true or not, but it was definitely an accusation that happened. So it's like when comedians come out and accuse somebody of stealing jokes, that's just as much a risk on their reputation. Because then if it's proved that they didn't, then it's like, oh, you're just trying to like bring somebody down, and it makes it look like really petty.
Well, some comedians tour with each other, and then they'll hire like local talent to do the opening acts, and I'm pretty sure that they're a reasonably tight network, like regionally and then nationally. It seems like, you see, and like my parents like to go to the comedy club, and when they're doing the reel in the back, sometimes you'll see like where some of these people have all been, and they've all done their show at the same comedy clubs all over the country. I bet it's harder to survive as a comedian than it is as like a band or a group or a music group. Because they don't pull audiences. I mean, some comedians will fill a theater, but I can't think of many comedians that are filling like stadiums or arenas. Not like, what's his name, Rip Torn, and running around throwing confetti at people, but like actually like headlining a freaking arena. Does that even happen? Would people even pay to sit at like up in the stands to see a tiny dot and then look at a jumbotron for 30 minutes? Like, I mean, I wouldn't. That's what pay-per-view is. I'm actually really surprised that like stand-up comedy and group laughing sessions have survived pandemic. Like in any form. It seems like cramming a bunch of people into a sardine can and making them breathe heavily as they laugh out loud is a bad idea. And like Hulu and Netflix or whatever, the groups that have the streaming platforms, they seem to be really selective about the comedians they want to elevate and promote.
Yeah, it's funny that whole like Joe Rogan podcast circuit group of people is starting to eat itself. Like they all split off and made their podcasts. Now they're all touring each other's podcasts. And then it's like, I saw it's funny how YouTube keeps trying to suggest that group of podcasters to me as if I don't see them in their little stupid algorithm trying to like feed me the Joe Rogan machine. But it's like, what was it? Tom Segura interviewing Quentin Tarantino. And I'm like, what makes you think I want to listen to either one of these fucks? Like straight up YouTube, what have I done to make you diss my personality, to make you think that I would be this person? That's fucked up. And every time Joe Rogan pops up, I'm like, what did I do? What did I do to make it seem like I would be this fucking Jordan Peterson crazy motherfucker that like would actually click on this YouTube?
So,
because then it's like that shit, it happens I know they're just trying to feed people that shit. It happens like every 3 weeks.
It happens all the time. I want guitar videos. I want guitar amp videos. I want synthesizer videos. I want videos on how to fix my truck. I want the car wreck videos because that stuff's entertaining to me. I like. I want stuff about fishing when I'm interested in like fishing, but that's really rare right now because I've watched all of the how to tie knot videos that I think that I need for the time being. But for whatever reason, YouTube thinks that I need to see some Jordan Peterson interview or some other Jordan Peterson talking about some other crap that I clearly don't, that I've indicated that I'm not interested more times. Like I actually went and looked at my not interested list. It's literally all Jordan Peterson videos. And they keep sending me Jordan Peterson videos like they think that I'm going to change my mind. Seriously, like it's the distribution of
Dude, why is YouTube trying to push Jordan Peterson on everybody?
Seriously, it doesn't.
What is up with that? What the fuck? Who's at the head of YouTube? They're like, you know what? People just really need more Jordan Peterson in their lives. Let's like push that to the top of the algorithm list. Who is this person? A black male in their 40s. Give him Jordan Peterson. A Chinese American male in his 40s. Give him Jordan Peterson. This woman who's in her 30s. Give her Jordan Peterson. Like, what the fuck? She needs
more Jordan Peterson, obviously. I mean, fuck.
What is this idea that anybody needs more Jordan Peterson?
YouTube had a really good algorithm fine-tuning system for a while, and then somehow it broke in the last 2 years. I never saw anything about Jordan Peterson before the pandemic. That probably means I need to go back through my liked history to the beginning of pandemics. There might be one Jordan Peterson video that I watched unknowingly, and now it thinks that because I didn't do anything about it then, thinks that I'm into it now or some other weird crap. It's got to be something simple or alternatively simple absurd like that. But one would think that this whole like not interested, don't show me anymore, don't show me any of this channel would have some kind of weighting on the algorithm, but it doesn't seem to. I've even filled out their whole tell us why thing numerous times, and it doesn't seem to do any good. So I'm not convinced that their algorithm even works anymore.
No, definitely not, because I used to do that too, and it was like not helping. It was specifically on Joe Rogan videos, and I would like write these little angry diatribes. Like,
it makes you feel better, but it doesn't solve anything.
Totally. But nobody's reading that shit. Definitely not. Oh, you're complaining about Joe Rogan? Here's more Joe Rogan in your algorithm somehow.
YouTube is like trying to do the Facebook make them mad to engage them more tactic, and they didn't realize, a few months later that it completely backfires, and at least YouTube doesn't have a stupid headset. Like, imagine for a second if to listen to YouTube you had to have a special set of headphones.
Oh God. I'm not far from that, honestly.
Like, you have to switch from your Oculus headphones or headset when you're done Facebooking and you want to use YouTube. You got to switch to the YouTube or the Google headset. But then when you want to use Office, you've got to switch to your Microsoft headset because it's no longer compatible with Oculus. But you can use the web version of Meta and Facebook through your whatever Microsoft, the HoloLens setup. Yeah, you can use the web version of it, but it's not as robust as full Meta Oculus system. And then when you want to play games, you got to put on your Steam headset, which might still be compatible with Oculus, but probably won't be by the time that this whole micro world evolves and emerges. I think the whole, I hate to use the term metaverse because it's so dumb, but I think that we're going to get a bunch of different corporate variations on it that it'll just make it worse. It'd be like we'll have 12 versions of the internet and they'll all be full of ads, and the only thing that the reason people will go for them is because of the peripheral hardware and like what kind of willingness to invest in the full biometric suit, or what kind of additional support those ecosystems offer. I think that's what it'll end up coming down to if it ever gets that far, and I hope it doesn't. Or maybe I should hope that it does, because that could mean that there would be a significant portion of the population just kind of lays around on a lounger all day long, drooling on themselves, playing in the metaverse. And they won't be like out in real life.
I'm not gonna say that I'm excited that Meta is failing, but I'm really glad that working in virtual reality did not become a thing. It completely just defeats the purpose of abstracting a layer of reality to just go in there and fucking do work. That's fucking stupid. That was like, I can't describe how intellectually vapid one has to be to take this level of technology and try to turn it into just another office.
Is there actually a faster method of data entry than a mouse and keyboard yet?
I don't think so. Not really.
There isn't. There absolutely is not. And since most of the foundation or backbone of computing involves databases, I don't see how gloves and gestures will ever replace a mouse and keyboard.
No, the feedback is just really
like, there's no way gloves
useful.
will ever provide the same kind of tactile accuracy that a mouse and keyboard have in the hands of like a true keyboard ninja or keyboard samurai or whatever analogy we want to apply to the keyboard. There's no way that gestures with the current technology will ever come close. In a virtual keyboard, someone just waving their fingers in midair, that's like a fantasy. I'm sure somebody can do it, but we're talking about like super users, not average computer users, not people who are doing office work virtually.
Right. Even people who are doing simulation work, it's probably easier for them to work on a keyboard and mouse with like a monitor rather than a headset in virtual reality and gloves. Like just because of the actual ease of access of executing a function instead of having to, I mean, I'm sure if someone put in years of work and learning that, maybe they'd be better at it.
I think it would make sense if you were remote operating or remote controlling some kind of humanoid robot. Then it would make sense to have a fully immersive virtual environment where you were controlling something, because that's what it is. It's like an extra abstraction layer going into a virtual reality world to do office work. I think The Office makes sense in like an augmented reality environment where you still have a desk and a computer that you can interact with. have floating data or have a floating file cabinet where you can store data. That makes sense. So much of this stuff, though, it seems like it's being designed by people who don't actually use computers or understand how computers are actually used. But they have an idea of how it should look when somebody uses a computer. Because it's really a fashion statement and not a functionality statement.
There's just not a lot of situations in which it makes sense.
F-35 pilot. They're already looking at a screen on the inside of a helmet. But they can also pull the screen out of the way.
Maybe a submarine pilot.
Submarine pilot. There we go. A submarine operator. Yeah, that's perfect for that. Because they wouldn't be able to see outside the thing anyways.
Right.
But that also would be just as well served by putting somebody in front of a computer with a training interface.
Right.
Like a tactile, physical touch, can touch it with knobs and shit interface. Like,
well, that's like on the remote ship controls for like a boat. They use screens and like a physical setup, but not like the headset.
Yeah,
because like they could use a virtual reality headset, but the screen seemed to be better. I don't know. Maybe just for the sake of like you're not able to wear a headset for that long.
Maybe it's because when it's on a screen and you see the ocean moving up and down in front of you, that's enough to induce a little bit of seasickness. But if you were wearing a headset and that was happening, you'd probably end up puking all over.
Oh, definitely puke if it was a headset. Yeah. It's making me sick just even thinking about it.
So maybe boating simulation is not a good environment for headsets.
I mean, in that context, probably not for flight either. Like if you're not actually in the air, because I know whenever I would play games in which I was flying first person on virtual reality, I maybe had like a half an hour limit before the motion sickness would start. And if it's like, if I tried to go like a minute past that point, it's like, no, you're going to throw up. And I think, I'm not sure if that point can be trained out, period. It's like, I know it can be put off, but that dissociation between the body and reality, I think, can only go on for so long before the body's like, hey, what's happening?
Well, our brains can only produce so many neurotransmitters to stave off like the difference between what our eyes and ears are telling us. And I know that it can be accomplished with like dissociative hypnotic chemicals, but that's probably not a good idea to give those things to people who are engaged in like flight. I wonder, does this mean that like remote operator aerial combat, does that mean that that kind of thing can't actually exist because the pilots have a limited flight time before they puke?
But they use screens. They don't use the headset.
Well, then that's why they don't use headsets, because they probably found out, oh crap, if we put these guys in headsets, they're going to puke if they're not feeling like G-forces, because the F-35 pilots aren't puking, but they also are actually in the plane.
Yeah, Based on that, it just seems like the headset might be
Bad idea.
yeah, it might be something that sci-fi made seem more plausible than it is in reality. And it's just never going to be viable because people can't wear headsets for longer than like an hour at a time.
Yeah, like the most highly trained super user might be able to go 80 minutes, 90 minutes maybe, but then like what, their brain wrecks and they have like mush and they can't function at the desired level of performance that they need to. Because I know that's what happens to me when I play a game too long. After a while, my brain's just like, nope, sorry, buddy, you can't do it. We're not going to let you. Although I can play a flying game longer than I can play like a first-person shooter. And I can play a driving game for a really long time too, but not as long as I used to be able to.
Talking about with a headset or just without?
Just in general. I can't even imagine how long I'd be able to play. Like 10 minutes, 5. I think I might be able to go 5 minutes with a headset playing a first-person shooter before is too much. But I don't have enough, like, I haven't logged enough time with a headset playing first-person shooters. Driving games are the easiest, I think, for me to acclimate to, though, because I know that I'm not upside down. Whereas with an airplane or flying game, at least with with some of them, you end up upside down at some point, and you know you're not. That's the stuff that really starts to mess with me. Like when there's too much motion, like in front of me, that doesn't jibe with what I expect physically. Like when first-person shooters started adding like the running physics, where the rifle would be moving around, and at first it was cool, but then it started getting more and more nuanced and more complicated. And then now I can't even take it for very long. Like I was saying, like 5-10 minutes. Third-person shooters I can play for longer because they don't have that kind of everything's bouncing action.
Well, a lot of stuff does have screen shake, which gives you the option to turn it off on some of them, but some of them you can't.
Yeah, or like
and the screen shake makes a huge difference. Whenever I'm on Marvel's Avengers, like it would like make me sick when Hulk would do shit and the screen would shake, and I'm like, dude, what's up with this? And I turned it off and fucking went away. So there's just something about like excessive screen shake that is not, everybody's brain can't handle it the same way.
It reminds me of action movies with poor fight choreography. They end up with a lot of cuts because there's not really a good fight scene happening, versus like a Donnie Yen fight sequence where you can tell that it's the same camera for at least 30 seconds straight, and then they switch to a different angle, and it almost seems like it was seamless, like the other camera wasn't even there, because it's a great fight scene and they do impeccable choreography. I think that it's a mask for games that are actually lacking something else. It's like, oh, we don't really have that interesting a story. We're gonna make you grind through a bunch more stuff. Well, let's throw this other stuff in here to distract you, make it harder. Not more enjoyable. It doesn't do anything to improve gameplay or improve the story or improve character interaction or player interaction, engagement, whatever. It just serves to be an impediment. What kind of asshole adds that to a game? I'm sure that somebody would say like, well, if you get sick, you shouldn't do it, or some other series of diminutive comments. But I don't think games are supposed to make people feel sick. That's not a selling feature.
Right. I think it's people like, okay, so when you get the like flashing like epilepsy warnings, I feel like a lot of times people put those strobe lights or strobe effects in just to create some sort of physical nauseating effect on the people who aren't epileptic. So then it's like, it's understanding that if you do certain things, the worst case scenario, you're going to trigger a response and just shut people's brains down. So if like we can manipulate that and make it so like people who aren't epileptic, they're getting like these weird effects, it'll make the game seem cooler. And that shit got exploited in a way where it's like my brain's fine with it, but I just hate that so much of like entertainment is dependent upon these flashes of light or loud explosions in order to induce a fight or flight response in
There's
people who aren't susceptible to like worse.
Well, there, and I'm only aware of this with musicians, stage performers who develop a sensitivity to strobe lights where it gives them vertigo. Like it induces vertigo. And like, I think, oh God, what was it? Like Ed Sheeran, I think, is one of the people who's gets it, and the singer for Tool, and I think Bono, like they all get. That's why they all started wearing like dark ass sunglasses, because, and the singer for Tool, he wears like hard plastic body armor and a helmet on stage at times because it gets so bad that he might fall over and, you know, doesn't want to crack his dome. So it's definitely something that can be induced environmentally and probably through overexposure over time. But if we start kids off with these games when they're very young, they probably stand a greater risk of developing that kind of condition earlier in life. Maybe we can only withstand, you know, a billion flashes of light before our brain's like, nope, you're done. And just eating away at it. And normally, under normal circumstances, that's enough for like 10 lifetimes. But with video games and concerts, it's enough for like 0.6 lifetimes or something. You know, it always amazed me how how lasers started becoming more and more common at music events, becoming more and more powerful. And then at one point, I remember there was this period of time where professional grade cameras, like digital cameras, really expensive cameras, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 digital camera systems were being ruined. Their sensors were being just toasted by the laser systems that were being used on stages. And it just made me think, like, fuck, if it's destroying a sensor, I wonder what it does to the human eye.
Oh, I can only imagine. Jesus Christ.
Like, I know. I remember I know that the performance industry does some really strange things, because I remember talking to a front of house engineer and the main mix engineer one time about wearing earplugs, and they said they always wear earplugs, and I said, really? And you just mix with earplugs on? He's like, oh yeah. And it made me think, it's like, well, that means everyone else who's not wearing earplugs doesn't get the benefit of whatever they're doing, because they can't actually hear what everyone else is hearing.
Yeah, that's kind of messed up, actually. That's fucked up. Unless they're going to hand out earplugs.
Yeah, and like they were always, you know, everyone who was always like part of the audio engineering team, they all wore earplugs. All the riggers wore earplugs. Everyone who was involved in working at the place, they always wear earplugs. But the attendees, only a portion of them wearing earplugs. And really, the mix is only good like in that one central location where the mix engineers are sitting in the middle of the house, and you're too close. It's inverse square law applies, and it sounds completely different the closer you get. Same as the further away one gets. So it's like it's a strange proposition because there's no place where it can actually be fine tuned. There's only really one small area where it's fine tuned, and then everywhere else is kind of at the mercy of, I don't know. I guess people just want to see the thing in person, see the performance in person, and that matters more. I can't say that I've been to many concerts that sounded terrible, but I've definitely been to a few that were just too loud. Like no matter.
Yeah, almost every hip hop or rap show is the bass is too loud and the vocals are
blown out,
like drowned out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they start screaming and blow out the mic, and then they're unintelligible.
Yeah, it's like everybody turns the bass like all the way up. It's like, man. That's that's part of the reason it's hard to go to shows anymore, because like you're saying, everything is generally just so loud that you're like, do I feel like my ears ringing today? No, not really. I'll stay home.
I love bass music too. I love it. I love some really deep drum and bass, or some jungle, or some well-produced hip hop. Like some of the stuff has delicious bass on a system that's tuned properly, where it's not like a preponderance of bass machine. But it's tough because, I mean, even when I was in my 20s, I thought a lot of that stuff was too loud. Find myself walking further and further away from the stage just so I can listen to the music, because I don't really care what a person looks like when they're on stage. Music isn't made by, we don't listen with our eyes. We're supposed to listen with our ears.
Like, I remember Skrillex actively not wanting to go like up front. I was like, you know what? The back of the room is loud enough. This is plenty loud. I don't need to get up closer. Specifically, like, not to say it didn't happen before, but I definitely remember at that point being like, you know what? All those people up front by the speakers are fucking insane. And it was like, it was, it's fun to be there, but it's like, once you realize the destruction that happens on your ear, even with earplugs in, there's no way they're not still getting vibrated.
Oh, yeah. Well, it can only attenuate those pressure changes so much.
Right.
And even if you have, like, the 30 decibel reduction earplugs, and then you put another 30 decibel reduction, like cans, like the plastic ones that have the additional foam inside, there's still a huge pressure change that's occurring through your mouth, through the backside, through the eustachian tubes, into your inner ear. It's not like a closed system. There's still other ways that our body regulates the pressure in our ears. And so, not to mention what that kind of pressure change does to our organs. Like, we're not actually supposed to sit there and vibrate like that repeatedly for extended periods of time. And like the amplitude that some of those giant cabinets put out, like, I remember plenty of raves where I would see people hugging subwoofers and speaker stacks just right up on them. And obviously they were on drugs, because nobody in their right mind would do that. Somewhere along the line,
people do some crazy things.
Well, somewhere along the lines, I think that people decided that louder was meant more better. And fortunately, I think we're kind of in a place now where the music isn't necessarily like completely in your face all the time. Like,
well, and people would upgrade their subwoofers, but not upgrade the rest of the system. So then you have to turn it up loud instead of like keeping it low and clear. Because the bass is going to drown everything else, and you have to turn everything else up to accommodate. Yeah, I think especially when you're supposed to feel bass, not hear it, and that principle alone, I think, makes it easier to equalize things for not blowing out eardrums. But when people don't realize that they're not supposed to hear the bass tone, that's when they end up going so loud and end up desensitizing their ear that they have to go even louder. Whereas like if I get to a point where if I feel like my ears are ringing, I'll turn it down instead of up, because it's like the only way you can make it more intense at when you hit that point is to turn it up. But if you turn it down and let your ears reset, then it can like become, if you give your ears a chance to like reaccommodate, then you're not going to like desensitize them over time.
It's like you get clarity, range, and power, and you can only really choose two. Because if you overpower the system, you might get some range, but you'll lose clarity. But if you shoot for clarity, you probably will end up with range, and it will definitely require a lot of power, but it might not be that loud.
Yeah. Which feels like you're missing out, but when you can hear everything, then it becomes something else.
Yeah.
Which then you're like, oh, I didn't know that was there. And it's like, yeah, you didn't know because you were fucking drowning it out with the bass, or drowning it out with the mids, or drowning it out with the fucking highs or something. But like a lot of drum and bass isn't appreciated because people have the bass turned up too much. So then they're missing like half the song.
Yeah, that's just like bass and clicks. And a few like synthesizer stabs if it's a preponderance of bass music. Like even like the heaviest like subwoofer test music, the like bass bombers or bass invaders or bass from outer space, any of that stuff. There was a lot of mid-range information because those were actually car stereo test systems, not just subwoofer test systems. And the music was kind of cheesy because, you know, the only lyrics were bass. And sometimes they used like the rest of the name of the entire album repeatedly. But for the most part, the music was very complex, and it was designed to showcase speaker frequency reproduction. And some of that stuff was really interesting, like once or twice. Because you don't actually want to listen to like something that's designed to show off the full range of a system. That's not actually music. That's just demo material. But you can't hear that stuff if a system is all bass and no mid-range. Like all of the really cool stuff happens in the mid-range.
Well, and I didn't even really understand that until I was trying to write drum and bass music and thinking that, oh, it's drum and bass, so you must need to like go really heavy on the bass, but then you realize that you have to make room for everything else, and that includes making the bass more sparse and also not too loud to actually be able to have other things harmonize with it. And I think that's like when you hear really well done drum and bass, or really, whether hip hop or rap or whatever, and the bass is clear and everything else is clear, it's hard to know what's actually happening until you like get under the hood. But I think it's really easy for people to think that it's just turning up the bass, instead of actually like the composition needing to be done a certain way, and also like the type of bass. Like you just can't turn a stand-up bass into an 808 or vice versa. It's like, but people will think that they're interchangeable just because they don't understand what's even happening with those instruments. So that's where I'm like,
I'm actually a really
there's a
big
lot
fan
to it.
of that, like late '90s, early 2000s neo R&B, like wall of bass sound that has like no. It sounds like there's no high frequency involved. It's just low. But the thing that I liked about it was that there was so much definition. You could still hear like what was being played. You could still hear those finger slides across the string, and it was just so thick and big sounding. But also those bass lines were really sparse, and when they moved really slowly, and they would hold a note for a long period of time. They weren't like busy. Like a lot of those bass sounds just couldn't exist in modern music because there's no space anymore.
Well, a lot of times it would play the same like line on a mid-range instrument in the bass.
Yep.
So it sounded indistinguishable because they were indistinguishable in that it'd be the same exact phrase on two instruments. So like Rage Against the Machine did that a lot. Like Tom Morello, a lot of the reason their fucking melodies sound so heavy is because they're doubling them up in like an octave apart.
I think they also used a bunch of like octave pedals too to make it even thicker.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, beyond that,
because that guy is a fucking effects master. Yeah.
But it was like studying their sound.
Exceptional Radio.
How I learned how to make that effect happen.
Yeah.
Some drum
Exceptional
and bass
Randos
like
show is produced live in Sunroom Studios
Simon
Bass
Bassline
Capsule
Smith
and in
and drum
partnership with
sound. We're really good at that.
3.5 RadioCallisti.org.
You just have to
Remember to catch our
learn that
Exceptional Randos live stream on
technique,
YouTube
and then
every
you
Sunday
hear it
between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.